in explaining your story quests, you talk about a new era of learning. Can you elaborate a little bit on that idea? Jenaia, would you get us started with a little bit of understanding that new era of learning?
Sure. Well, Marty and I like to say that it's like a baton being passed from an era of information manipulation to one of content specialists. In the past, we rewarded people based on what they knew, not what they did with what they knew. Now we're starting to move towards a model where people are rewarded for being able to access information and then problem solve with it. And not just problem solve as individuals, but problem solve in a collaborative environment in which the group is bigger than the individual.
I see.
I think
Marty,
that
you have something to add to that? Good.
Yeah, basically I think when we're talking about the baton being passed, it's basically from the technology folks, the IT people who have been about using technology platforms in schools and colleges, and now looking at this actually as a medium for content, and really the whole theme of what we're trying to get across tonight is this whole notion that content really trumps technology. And probably the best way for us to make that point is to take a few minutes out here and have you watch this film that we produced.
Okay, let's switch to the video then.
Freeze-dried rose, you will never be.
Stories and storytelling, that remarkable ability we all share to suspend disbelief and step into a world of our own or another's creation. At the Virtual World Story Project, we dream them, write them, preserve them, and for the first time here in Second Life, have the chance to build and invite others into and co-create them with us. We call these experiences story quests.
I think this is the prettiest world, so long as you don't mind a little dying. When Jenaia and I first met, we immediately realized we shared the same vision for Second Life. Our deeply held belief was that content trumps technology. In establishing the Virtual World Story Project, we committed ourselves to collaborating with storytellers across the grid to weave our collective narrative threads into something magical, something completely unique.
Now that you've all experienced Uncle D for yourselves, I'd like to invite you to write a letter or poem or phone message to him. Imagine that you're a friend, relative, student, or colleague from school. What would you like to say to him?
I lost my faith. Oh, dear fate, I hope you won't be disappointed.
You know, and as much as I have personally experienced the story quest multiple times and really become a resident inside that story quest, that movie still gives me a little bit of the chills, and it's such a wonderful snapshot or introduction to the beautiful experience in that story quest. And I noticed in your first answers you both mentioned creativity, collaboration, participation, and these are all the things that the NETS is trying to promote with people. So how did you decide to use stories to facilitate these wonderful modalities of learning?
Well, stories teach us about ourselves by opening our hearts and minds and helping us develop emotional intelligence. One of my favorite quotes of all time comes from Barry Lopez, who says, "If stories come to you, learn to care for them and give them away. Sometimes a person needs a story more than food to be alive." And I really believe that's true. We need to be nurtured on an emotional, mental, and collaborative level that food just doesn't do for us. Marty?
think that one of the keys in terms of using story, whether we go to the experiences of Frank McCourt and his excellent book called Teacher, is that you need to create engagement. If you can't get students, whether they're in public schools, in high school, junior high school, or colleges, engaged, interested in what's going on, you're not going to get them to have anything that they're going to take away or understand or learn from the experience. And I think what you see is that through the storytelling that you do as a teacher and they do, and hopefully through experiences like the Story Quest, where the model is designed to elicit stories and co-creation, you're then able to create real learning. And I think that's really the goal. Sticks, exactly.
And the beautiful thing about stories, and as you know, I'm very involved in storytelling projects with my students a lot, but every culture throughout time has had storytelling, story circles, family traditions of stories passed down to it. It's universal. So I really feel like the whole piece about enjoying stories, sharing in stories, creating stories, knowing your story, helping someone else write their story. This is a universal humanity piece. It's not just a literacy piece or an English language learner piece or something that you fill out on a Scantron piece. It's a piece of humanity. Getting to know your story, putting your story in a place where it'll be passed down to the ages, allowing your story to grow and change and evolve. But having said that, and being in this very happy place with this beautiful, beautiful work of yours, I need to switch gears for a minute here and do a little devil's advocate work and bring up the piece about assessment. When it comes to teaching in the classroom, what a lot of us face is the age-old credo of, well, if we value it, we have to assess it. How does one assess the skills and creativity and collaboration that falls under something like a story quest?
I knew you would have to bring that up. My personal experience is that the assessment happens within the story itself. Assessment happens through self-assessment as you're given feedback as you're going along, from your peers, from your teacher even. Watching your teacher learn is an important skill to master yourself. That's how you learn. We watch people learn. Assessment is part of project-based experiential learning. And you demonstrate the mastery of what you've learned by doing something, as opposed to coming back and having to take a test later. In other words, the assessment is built into the activities.
I think the key
concept.
I think the key that we're talking about, and I think both Jim G. and Peggy Sheehy have made this point about gaming, is that the assessment is part of the game. If you're sitting and you're playing, just your basic entertainment game, you're going to progress because you've completed a task, because you've problem solved. Ultimately, the same is going to be true on this story quest, and is going to be measured by the teacher. And in other words, has there been engagement? Has there been something produced as a result of this? Has there been attitude changes? Ultimately, what we're trying for here, and what Peggy was talking about before, is really not just somebody being able to tell their story, but also being able to hear somebody else's story and appreciate that story. Ultimately, we're moving in this direction towards globalization and diverse communities, diverse cultures, and one of the things that's going to be very important for the 21st century is building the capacity for empathy and understanding, and the ability to relate to different people.